Hi, everyone, and welcome to our quick hit Think Like a Designer Design Principles for Building Apps. I am Brianna Levin, and I'm an interaction designer here at QuickBase. And I'm also joined by my fellow interaction designer, Arohi Shah. As you watch our quick hit, we hope you learn 1, what design principles are and how to use them, 2, how you can apply design principles to your apps, and 3, what some benefits are to using design principles.
So what are design principles? Design principles are a set of considerations that form the basis of any good product. Design principles are often used in order to help teams with decision-making. We will be talking about 10 principles today that would be useful to apply when you are building apps. And they fit into 4 categories: creating an intuitive layout, understanding your users, using color meaningfully, and organizing your content. The first category of principles is creating an intuitive layout, where you will learn about good continuation and proximity. Good continuation is about how elements arranged in a straight line or a smooth curve are perceived as a group, and they are interpreted as being more related than elements not in the line or curve. So in this example of a bar chart, you'll see that the bars are not representing good continuation, as the bar heights vary in sequence, forming a discontinuous and abrupt line with the tops of the bars. In contrast, this bar chart has the same data, but the bars are arranged to let your eyes move in a simple curve. This represents good continuation. This sorting from low to high by the y-axis can easily be done in the chart settings. With applying good continuation, people are able to transition between elements in a more efficient way. And in the case of our second bar chart example, viewers of this chart are more easily able to compare and contrast data. In our second principle in the category of creating an intuitive layout is proximity. It tells us that elements that are close together are perceived to be more related than elements that are farther apart. Proximity is one of the most powerful means of indicating relatedness in design, and it will generally overwhelm competing visual cues, like when 2 elements are really similar to each other. In this example, you'll see a form with elements equally spaced, and it's not obvious whether ID number, phone, and address are tied to the name or the company. With applying the principle of proximity, we have elements closer and farther apart here by changing the form settings to include breaks. So now we can tell more clearly which fields are related. So applying the principle of proximity makes it more clear to your users what elements are related and therefore what is being asked of them in this case.
The next bucket of design principles that we want to walk you through all pertain to understanding your users and who you're building your apps for. A deep insight into your users will help you keep your apps focused on delivering a great end user experience. But how do we know what our users really want? When users use your apps, they have certain expectations for how data might be displayed or what would happen if they clicked on something. These expectations are mental models. A mental model is what users believe about a system, such as your app. This model isn't based on facts, but rather it is constructed by your user's past experiences. So when an app doesn't function in a way that the user expects, they get confused. For example, a mismatch between a user's mental model and your app can be in how you choose to represent your data. In this example, you can see a line graph depicting student exam scores with each student's name along the x-axis. The purpose of a line graph is to track changes over time, but this graph is trying to compare exam scores. This mismatch between how the data is being presented and how line graphs are commonly used goes against expectations. Rather than using a line graph, a bar chart instead allows you to more easily compare the exam scores as well as process the data more efficiently. This new approach to representing the data likely better aligns with your mental model, making the usability of this chart more intuitive. Knowing your users' mental models is really the foundation of designing usable, user-centered apps. Building the perfect app takes a lot of time, so by leveraging what you know about your users' mental models can remove any guesswork and extra app building time. By making small changes to accommodate your users' expectations, like changing the way you tell your data story, you can ensure your users will always come back to use your apps. Another way you can begin understanding your users is by creating personas. Personas are fictional characters that help you and your team better understand user goals, skills, attitudes, behaviors, and experiences. Creating personas makes users tangible and helps you and your team develop empathy for all types of users who use your apps. For example, one of our personas we have created is Data Entry Dan. As you can see, we have specified Dan's expertise using QuickBase, some of his wants and needs relating to the apps he uses, as well as some skills and preferences that shape who he is as a user. It is important to recognize that Dan is only one persona matching one type of user. So creating a variety of personas to match your primary users will allow you to design your apps with all users in mind. Once you have your personas created, you might be wondering how you can apply them directly to your apps. Some simple ways are by 1, specifying user roles and permissions, 2, designing different dashboards based on each of your users' needs, and 3, creating different home pages depending on each of your personas. As you think about your personas, having conversations with your users is the best way to truly understand their goals, needs, challenges, and pain points. With your continued user research, you can be assured that you are designing apps that have all of your users in mind.
The next section we want to cover with you is how to use color meaningfully. We will be discussing 3 principles: accessibility, color, and highlighting. The principle of accessibility says that objects and environments should be designed to be usable without modification by as many people as possible. This is a very broad principle, so we will specifically be giving examples of how it relates to choosing colors that are helpful for people with color blindness. I'm going to show you a series of screenshots to help you see how someone with color blindness, specifically monochrome, would see a screen. So you see this color-coded screen here. Here's how a person with color blindness could see it. They most likely cannot differentiate the colors because of lack of contrast. On the other hand, when being more mindful of color contrast by using color contrast checkers, here's another table. And with color blindness, someone can see the difference between those color rows better. Here's another example on a pie chart. With color blindness, all the sections of the pie chart look the same, so they wouldn't be necessarily able to match what colors from the chart go with the colors on the legend. So instead, here's a better example with some more color contrast between. And someone with color blindness would still be able to differentiate the sections of the pie chart. The benefit of knowing the principle of accessibility is that you're building apps that are usable by everyone, including those with diverse abilities. The next principle is color. Color is used in design to attract attention, group elements, indicate meaning, and enhance aesthetics. A couple of guidelines to use when you're using color is to pay attention to the number of colors, limit the palette to what the eye can process at a glance. This is usually 5 colors depending on the complexity of the design. Also use aesthetic color combinations. Some tips are to use adjacent colors on the color wheel, color combinations found in nature, or look up color scheme generators. One important thing to note is that color should not be the sole indicator to tell the difference between 2 elements. Taking a look at this example here, we show a colorful chart, but the colors are randomly assigned. They aren't really conveying anything additional. The colors can even be considered confusing and distracting in this case. There are multiple bars with the same colors without any connection. On the other hand, here we have assigned a different color for each category, and we have a legend to label the colors' meanings. So when using only a few colors, this extra meaning is conveyed with just a glance, which is more efficient than if it was conveyed through text or other means. So color is providing an extra meaning in a beautiful way. The last principle in this section is highlighting, which is a technique for bringing attention to an area of text or image. If applied improperly, however, hiding can be ineffective and actually reduce performance. A guideline to follow when highlighting is to highlight no more than 10% of a design. Another note is that highlighting can be done through bold, italics, underline, and typeface along with color. In this example, we have the rows color-coded. And because they are all assigned a color, there aren't any specific ones that necessarily jump out. Here we have color-coded only 2 important characteristics that users need to keep track of. Since they stand out, this lets viewers of the table immediately see the most relevant records to them. With highlighting, you're making your users' process of finding information faster by pointing out what is most important.
The last bucket of design principles that we want to walk you through all relate to organizing your content within your apps. Knowing how to reduce complexity with the information you present will decrease the amount of mental effort your users will be required to use when interacting with your apps. Let's walk through a few ways to do this. One of the main ways to organize your content in order to increase visibility and decrease complexity is through hierarchical organization. Structuring your app's content in such a way can help your users sift through data in forms quickly and effectively. One easy way to introduce hierarchy into your apps is through forms. Some forms you create may be short and sweet, but others may have many fields in a list, like in this example. In order to increase visibility, you can break your form fields into sections, allowing for better grouping and structure within the form itself. With section and section headings, you allow for easy scannability. Not only will adding sections and greater hierarchical structure to your apps help your users process the information quicker, it'll also help you as the app builders see all of your form fields and records more clearly. Another consideration when organizing your content is to think about how information is being recalled by your users when presented in a table. When your users use the table reports you build, they will likely encounter a lot of information that they will try to remember. The principle of serial positioning effects teaches us that when people try to recall items from a list, items at the beginning and at the end are more easily remembered than the items in the middle. When thinking about your table reports, records presented at the beginning of your table or at the end are best remembered by your users. In this example, you can see that the student column is sorted alphabetically. However, the more important column that the users are meant to pay attention to is the second, reading skill. Without any sorting on the reading skill column, users will likely remember the students by alphabetical order and forget the rest of the information pertaining to their reading skill. In this next example, you can see that we have sorted the reading skill column from needs improvement to exceeds expectations. With this revised ordering, users will now pay attention to which students need additional help reading, as well as those who exceed expectations. This sorting better helps the users focus on and remember the most important information presented in the table. By being aware of serial positioning effects, you can aim to organize information within your apps in a manner that makes it easiest for you and your users to remember it. Some ways to do this are by 1, limiting the amount of information your users are presented at once by relying on search, grouping, and filters. 2, sorting your columns to draw attention to the first most records and the last most records. And 3, moving the most important columns to the front of the table, as the users will likely see these first and remember them. The last principle we want to walk you through in our quick hit is the concept of chunking. As an effective way to organize content within your app, chunking is a technique used to combine items into smaller chunks, making the information easier to process and remember. The maximum number of chunks that can easily be processed by short-term memory is 4 plus or minus 1. When thinking about building your apps, a simple way to implement this principle and organize your content is by using the grouping feature within table reports. With grouping, your users will have an easier time remembering the table groups you create, as well as the content within them. Strive to have 3 to 5 groups, as this is the optimal number of chunks to include in your report. Strategically chunking your information can have a great impact on increasing memory and reducing the mental burden for your users. This will have a large effect on how your users will ultimately interact with your app. To wrap up our quick hit, we want to go over some next steps with you. Now that you have learned how to apply design principles to your apps, how can you ensure that you are increasing the app usage and user adoption? The first way is to conduct A/B testing with your users. A/B testing allows you to make decisions within your app based on your users' preferences, not just your own. The second way is to continue having conversations with your users to gather feedback. Setting up times to speak with your users allows you to more easily and quickly understand your users' wants and needs.
To learn some design tips and tricks that you can apply to your apps, check out Lisa Sawyer's session, Do It Yourself Again, More Simple Ways to Make Beautiful and User-Friendly Applications. Lisa has presented on this topic in the past, and it has been a favorite. The design principles that we highlight today and many more are greatly laid out in the book Universal Principles of Design by William Lidwell, Christina Holden, and Jill Butler. Check it out if you want to become a design principle whiz. Thank you so much for coming to our quick hit, and we hope you enjoy the rest of Empower.